This is a Ford Taurus. Well, not really. It's actually a tube chassis with a cockpit and a Chevy engine with some thin, tinny metal put on here to make it look like a Ford Taurus. Now, this car is actually pretty significant. It was once driven by Darrell Waltrip around the time that NASCAR was at its peak of popularity, but it's no secret that NASCAR has been struggling to keep Americans' interest in recent years. Now, there's a lot of reasons for this, but one that's starting to get tossed around to save the sport is to bring the stock back to NASCAR. Reunite the shake with the bake. If you're not first, you're last, Ricky Bobby. Boogity, boogity, boogity. Now, they tried pretty much everything rules-wise to make NASCAR more interesting with their own chase, kind of playoffs along with green light checkers to have exciting finishes. And then when they get people used to whatever set of rules that they're doing, they immediately go and change it. So it's pretty much guaranteed that every race fan is mad at NASCAR in at least some way. Despite their best efforts, NASCAR viewership is continuing to decline, and the way we consume entertainment now has a lot to do with it. Back in 1999, when this NASCAR was racing, all we had were TVs to watch. We would just stare at them all day long. That's why races where people go fast and turn left for hours was more entertaining, really, than watching reruns of Murder, She Wrote or Antiques Roadshow on a Sunday afternoon. Now we have Netflix and YouTube and our phones with an endless amount of things to watch, and there's really no reason to watch a NASCAR race in its entirety because you can watch all the crashes and the highlights and the finishes online later. Really, all that NASCAR has in its favor nowadays is the personalities with their drivers and presenters. One of my favorite personalities back in the day was Michael Waltrip, the baby driver, not baby brother, baby driver, the baby brother to Darrell Waltrip that drove this car right here, and he was actually on Twitter recently. He made a pretty big splash on Twitter. I was going to read from my phone. Listen, people, closely, and I will tell you why NASCAR team work financially is nearly impossible. NASCAR stands for National Association of Stock Car Club Racing. The stock piece of our name is gone. Bring back the stock and you might fix a broken business model. Now, this tweet was prompted by another major sponsor pulling out from a successful racing team and the ridiculous cost of building a stock car and the ridiculous amount it takes to sponsor a NASCAR team probably had something to do with it. So Waltrip thinks going back to the days of cars actually being kind of stock is the solution for everything. And I really like this idea. Let's go back to the days of the Superbird. Oh my. Oh my. Oh my. Now, everybody loves the legendary rare Superbird, the car that dominated the 1970 NASCAR season, but even the racing version of this wasn't exactly stock. The nose cone and the tailpiece that are on the actual stock car were there just for aerodynamics, but other than the actual body shell, everything else was different. It really had to be. You needed the body to be way more rigid for safety and performance, so a tube roll cage was integrated into the chassis, along with better brakes and a totally different suspension setup, and the motor was hot rodded with no regards for comfort or emissions or how loud it was. So even this legendary stock car wasn't very stock, but it was still close enough that the old saying goes that winning races on Sunday sold cars on Monday, and they did have to sell enough Superbirds to the public so it could actually qualify as a stock car. But after this, they changed the rules again and again, and the cars evolved into totally soulless race cars that are also ridiculously expensive to build, which is what we have today. So what if manufacturers got back involved in more ways than just a bunch of stickers? What if they were building the base for stock cars once again? You could kind of compare it to Formula One nowadays, as you would give a limit on engine displacement, let's say 5 liters, and it has to be naturally aspirated so we don't get into ridiculous, dangerous horsepower numbers, and it has to run on 93 octane maybe, pump gas, and you have to use the stock body panels of a 4-seater coupe. And it can't weigh less than a certain stock weight. Now, you can reinforce the car for safety and rigidity all you want, modify the suspension in whatever way you would like for the track, since an actual race car would be horrible to drive on the street. You wouldn't want to sell, say, 500 of these to the public with the same engine, suspension setup where it was just too harsh and rigid. So, race car, but similar, like this. Since back in the 90s, performance really wasn't that great from a front-wheel drive Taurus or a Monte Carlo. You couldn't build that into a stock car that anybody would want to see. But can you imagine a Frankenstein version of a Mustang against a Challenger and a Camaro, new here in 2018? And I know Toyota would get left out. I think they'd run with the Camrys, but they could get involved with the FRS or the new Supra that has a back seat. I don't know, does it have a back seat? But I mean, could you imagine how the world would freak out over a V8 powered factory Toyota sedan, maybe? Take the truck engine, put it in. It would be amazing. And they'd sell 500 of them in 5 minutes. All these race-inspired cars like the Demon or the Porsche GT2 RS, that's really crazy, they sell for double the MSRP. People would line up and they would buy them for whatever price manufacturers would want. So now you have the great drivers and personalities that makes NASCAR great, along with the lower cost since the manufacturers are actually getting involved again and actually building the cars for us. And they sell more cars in turn because people are actually interested in what manufacturers are doing. Pit them against each other racing. And Europe, with its endurance racing and Formula One manufacturers, get a loyal following from these races, just as big as the drivers sometimes. Now, I can't imagine this not being a success for NASCAR, but really they're already losing. So why not shake things up and do this again? I mean, look at this incredible car we have right here that was birthed from this idea. This car is crazy enough to justify buying the rights to the Roadrunner cartoon to stick on its giant rear wing. It actually has the horn, too, that sounds like the character. It's amazing. And the Midwest Dream Car Collection here in Manhattan, Kansas, is making my dreams come true by driving this thing. You can actually see it in person. They're going to open up their own display here in Manhattan and see this car for yourself, but I get to drive it. And that's my Prius key. That's my Phantom key. This is kind of sad. There we go. Oh yeah. Oh my God, I'm driving a Superbird. This is a total dream come true. Now, this isn't the fastest Superbird they made. It's only the 440 cubic inch V8. Say only, but it's the bigger engine. The faster one that makes these things really valuable is if it were a 426 Hemi. But still, even this one is a 440 and an automatic is worth well over $200,000. Might be the most expensive car I've driven. Whoa. That 440 still is just fine. You know, the acceleration is pretty good, but one thing that really surprises me is the comfort. These seats. You don't get seats like this anymore. They're the old school bench seat with lots of cushion. Handling wise, yeah, it's a big car. It does pretty good, actually better than I thought, but it is also very comfortable. There's a lot of body roll, but you know, it's definitely more of a cruiser. But the look, oh, this thing is insane. It's hard to believe this is a factory paint color in 1970. No bones about it. You definitely want to build a car like this and race it. Come on. Everybody would line up to buy one of these. I sure would. And especially if you make them civilized like this. I mean, we have radio, heater defroster, pop-up headlights. Those are really cool. God, this thing is awesome. And the tachometer setup is super cool in this thing. It's a tach within a clock. The whole gauge cluster is just really, really pretty. Oh man, I want a Superbird real bad. Real bad. Make her smoke, Bubby. Oh man, that is great. This thing is amazing. It's so worth whatever anybody wants to pay for them because it's a blast. It's beautiful. Now, I totally get why NASCAR wouldn't do this and why it probably won't ever happen again where we get stock cars in this form, but a guy can dream. I mean, it's such a big change for NASCAR, and I'm sure building these race cars employs a lot of people, and they're going to be very resistant to that industry going away. But man, just think about it. Could you imagine? And now I have to give this car back, which I don't want to. Thank you for watching.